Okay, so I didn't really want to make this video. I didn't want to make it because I figured that there's nothing that I could possibly say that would be any different from what anyone else who, like me, actually liked this movie hadn't already stated. But then I realized that no one has made a positive video about this movie, and that if they did, then it was buried and covered up by the trillions of negative videos that are being posted about this film. So I'm here to do my part and make a positive video about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, in hopes that someone sees this and realizes that it's okay to enjoy a movie that the majority of people don't. Because at the end of the day, it's just entertainment. Now, I'll get to my review in the second half of the video, most likely towards the end. But first, there are a few things that I wanted to get off my chest and clear up about the film and the discourse around it before I did that. So feel free to skip ahead if you want the review first and the rant afterwards, or vice versa. So something that I've been seeing a lot of lately is, well, basically people saying the same exact thing, in that this movie is either straight up terrible or boring. When I walked out of the theater after seeing the movie, I thought to myself and said that was one of the best MCU films ever, and that I loved it. I was excited to see others' reactions, of course expecting them, if not all of them, obviously not everyone's gonna have the same opinion as me, but a good majority to have at least slightly the same view as myself, only to feel like I stepped in an alternate dimension where I was a part of the minority who actually enjoyed this movie. Like, seriously, it initially felt like I watched a completely different film than everyone else. The lowest scores I've seen people give this movie is like 50 out of 100 or 3 out of 5, however, these different ratings go. Which basically means they didn't like it, but they didn't hate it either. A general review for this movie is a lot of people, and by people I mean critics and YouTubers who call themselves critics, is that they say this movie is alright. Now, alright or okay doesn't mean terrible, but apparently to some people it does. Nowadays, if something isn't great or amazing, it's automatically counted as terrible in certain people's eyes. It can't even just be a good movie. It either has to be great or beyond. And that kind of sucks. I think after Endgame, people have put the MCU on a pedestal and expect everything afterwards to be this extravagant event. I've said this before in my video about Phase 4, and I'll say it again. We're right back to where we were when Iron Man 3 and Age of Ultron released. After the big Avengers event, there are certain fans that are too impatient to wait for a build-up, and they want everything to be an event film. When they don't get what they want, they claim that the MCU is dead, and instead of dropping these films entirely and moving on to something else, they continue watching and make the same videos over and over, claiming that the franchise is failing, regardless of it continuing to make, a lot of money and earning that money back. But it's not about money to these people. They see a movie that they don't like and automatically assume that it's a failure. And they overreact about the story not going anywhere, even though it's clearly going somewhere. And they've only just now started to properly get the ball rolling in this multiverse saga. Also, people are referring to this film as if it's a part of Phase 4, which it isn't. This is the beginning of Phase 5. So there shouldn't be anyone complaining about Phase 4 anymore, because that's done and over with. But speaking of Phase 4, Kevin Feige even stated that specific phase was an experimental phase. So they were basically testing the waters with all these new characters that we were introduced to and see what worked. We literally have a reason as to why Phase 4 seems so disconnected, and yet people are still complaining about it. The next thing I want to talk about was people not forming their own opinions and judging a film or pretty much anything solely based on someone else's experience. I don't pay attention to early reactions to movies or shows or early reviews of anything in media, whether it's like video games or a book or whatever, because I don't want someone else's thoughts floating around in my mind and potentially altering the way that I see the content I'm consuming. Now, although I don't like reading or watching reviews before I see something, that doesn't mean investing in reviews before you consume content is wrong. It's fine. Do what you want. My problem is when people see your review and take another person's word for it without deciding to create their own opinion. The greatest movie in the world could be released tomorrow, and there could be someone who does a review on it. And in that review, they could be praising the movie and say it's amazing, but name an element that they didn't like, and because of that one element, someone will use that as an excuse not to go see it. It's usually because the movie doesn't sound like something they expected, or a rumor they heard about the film didn't come true, so they just write it off. Also, somehow, a movie just being alright means that it's bad for some reason in certain people's eyes. I said this before, but I've heard the term mid being thrown around a lot recently. Now, I'm not the best when it comes to new trends and the latest slang, but correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be, but I assumed mid was just like a shortened version of middling, which basically just means average, which is another word for alright. That's not bad in my eyes. It just means, like, yeah, I'll go see it again, maybe not tomorrow or next week, but I still had a good time. But then again, that's just my opinion. Like, it's okay to be indifferent about something. Differences of opinions are important. But going off of someone's opinion and not experiencing something for yourself isn't. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room that doesn't matter anymore and shouldn't even be in the room in the first place. The whole recasting of Cassie Lang from Emma Fuhrmann to Catherine Newton. Was it wrong the way the original actress for Teenage Cassie found out? Yes, it was. But that was 3 years ago at the time of this recording. People are tweeting about this as if it happened yesterday. And most of them who are talking about it don't even care about the situation. They just want to be angry about something. Why? Because Twitter hates big companies regardless of being on an app that is run by a big company. They're quote unquote angry about a recast that happened 3 years ago for an actress who was on screen for about a total of 50 seconds with one line. As I said before, the way she found out was not good, but Catherine Newton didn't have anything to do with it. The rest of the cast didn't have anything to do with it. And I'm pretty sure Kevin Feige didn't have anything to... I don't think he made that choice. These people are taking something that happened years ago and bringing it back to the surface when literally none of them were discussing it until the week of the movie's release. I'm pretty sure it's been enough time for Furman to get over something like this. These people who are tweeting this stuff act like she'll never have another job in Hollywood again. Things like this happen to actors all the time, but because it's a Marvel movie, aka a big company, aka Disney, that makes a lot of money, all of a sudden people start to care. That aside, I really enjoyed Newton's performance in this movie, and her dynamic with the rest of the cast. There were a few lines in the beginning of the movie when they introduced her that had me worried, because I was afraid that they were going to introduce her as like a rebellious teen who doesn't listen to anyone else and thinks they're an adult. But they didn't go that route, and I think the next scene when Scott, Cassie, and Hope are in the car was like the first sign that they weren't gonna take that character in that direction, as we actually see her listening to her father. But then again, I do have a crush on Catherine Newton, so I might be biased. Now to the review portion. I don't do reviews for movies or shows because honestly, I'm not really sure how to do them in an entertaining way. But I guess I'll try. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. When the first scene with Janet in the quantum realm, I don't think I blinked until the movie was over. My eyes were glued to the screen just because of how visually beautiful everything was. I feel like the tone was a lot less comedic, although there were jokes, but it felt a lot more focused on the story and the tone. Again, like, I don't know how to do reviews other than recapping the movie and saying how much I enjoyed it. A lot of people have been praising Jonathan Majors and his performance. They're not wrong. I thought he was like one of the most intimidating villains we've had. And I think the best part of this multiverse saga is that we don't really know where or when he'll show up next. Of course, there's Loki season 2, but after that, like, where else would he, pop up besides, Loki and Kang Dynasty? Like, when in between those two projects is he going to begin to build this, I don't even know what you call it, continue his escapades, I guess you could say. Of course, we know we're headed to Secret Wars, but we're still in that understanding stage of wondering how we get there. With the Infinity Saga, as great as it was, we knew where we were headed. Thanos collects the stones, and everyone we've met on the journey so far was going to team up and stop him. But with the theme of this saga being the multiverse, and seeing how unpredictable and randomized some of these timelines can be, I think that it'll be much more of a challenge to speculate on what might happen, just because of the fact that we're dealing with, you know, this bigger scope of things. With the multiverse, anything is possible. Yeah, we have the comics to pull from as reference, but lately, with comic book movies, they've been adapting these storylines and making them their own thing, rather than, whether that be mixing stories together or using a theme from one story and forming a new story. But I think that's where certain fans will get angry, because they won't be able to look at the comics and get a clear view on where the movies are going. And I think that plays a big role on why a portion of them are being so hard on recent projects, because they can't predict where we're going next as easily as they could in the early years of the MCU. It's a sort of fear of the unknown, and I think that's what's greatly shown during Phase 4, when so many people are freaking out over new characters. There's comfort in familiarity, but when you're introduced to new characters you may not be interested in or never heard of, and trying to decipher a storyline about the multiverse where anything can happen, where anything that can and will happen could happen. I understand why they can be a bit standoffish and not as invested. There's a much bigger mystery than before, because we're not just dealing with one antagonist. We're dealing with multiple versions of that character, with each one having their own motives and ways to go about things. And I'm excited to see just how each one differs from the last one. If I had to nitpick and name something that I didn't like about the film, then I'd say, I guess, the title. It's Ant-Man and the Wasp, and yet Hope isn't really that tied into the main side of the story. But then again, you could argue that the Wasp part of the title is referring to Janet, so there's something to, think about. I have in my notes here, MODOK. Yeah, he looks pretty, goofy, and whenever his faceplate is off. But I'm never one to make fun of, CGI, solely because I couldn't be able to do that if I tried, and I have no idea just how many hours it takes to make a 3D model. That's someone's art and hard work, and I'm not gonna, make fun of it. Also, I'm pretty sure that's just a given. There are a lot of things that won't translate from the pages of a comic into live action, and this is one example. But yeah, you see these people who try to empathize with CG artists and talk about how they don't get paid as much as they should, and then they turn around and talk about how bad their work is. Pick a lane. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the movie, as well as a one-sided comment. There are a bunch of valid criticisms about this movie, but most of the time you'll see a lot of nitpicks, such as, someone getting angry that Kang was defeated by ants. It's an Ant-Man movie. What did you expect to happen? Also, as cool as that scene was, because I thought it was cool and it gave me chills, it wasn't just the giant ants that defeated Kang, because it took a lot to take him down. if he is in fact down, which I don't think he is, there's a theory going around that suggests he might come back as the Beyonder in Secret Wars. I don't know how solid that theory is, but I do think there's a possibility that he might be the last Kang standing. Like at the end of Kang Dynasty, we think we won, and then this Kang shows up and turns the tables on the heroes. I guarantee you that Quantumania is the Age of Ultron of Phase 5. There's a lot of mixed reviews and a lot of terrible takes on this film, but I feel like in a few years, most likely around the time when Kang Dynasty releases, people are going to look back at this movie, praising it, and stating how good it actually is. Maybe not even then, because in a few months, it'll be on Disney Plus, which is when, the reaction channels will start to watch it, as well as a lot more of the general audience who just didn't see it in theaters for general reasons, whether that be financial means or what have you, as well as people seeing it for the second time since they've seen it in theaters, which is usually because of these reasons. When you get a much larger swell of individuals who come out and state how much they love the film. The same thing happened with Eternals, and I can see that happening with Quantumania as well. I don't understand how people looked at this movie stating that it's filler when Kang is the main villain. It's his first movie debut, and he'll be the main villain going forward. This isn't a movie that you can just skip over. But yeah, those were my thoughts on pretty much everything surrounding Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I want to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to form your own opinion, and I'll see you when I see you.